Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of BIM Pure Live. I am your host. I am Nick from BIM Pure, and we have a special guest for you today. But before moving on to the guest, first, if you're watching live today on May 29th, you can say in the chat where you are watching from. We're at a unusual time for the show at noon instead of 3 p.m. Eastern. So a bit different from usual. So let's move on to our sponsor. Thanks, Enscape, for sponsoring this episode of BIM Pure Live. What I like about Enscape sponsoring this is that I am a user of their product. I've been using Enscape since 2017, once I first learned about it. I love using this tool because of how simple it is to use and how easily it connects to Revit. How easy it is to set up materials. You don't have to manage separate files. Everything can be done directly in Revit. Enscape just released version 4.0. They have new people and vegetation assets. They have an NVIDIA denoiser. They have support for Rhino 8.3. They have a reskin of the UI in Revit. New ray trace artificial lights, global illumination. And they have support for new VR headsets, and improvement to Revit work sharing features. So a lot going on for Enscape. For me, always thrilled by the simplicity. I like trying different rendering tools, but I often come back to Enscape because how quick and simple and easy it is to use alongside Revit. So thanks a lot, Enscape, for sponsoring this season of BIM Pure Live. Learn more at enscape3d.com. So a quick glance at the chat. We've got Raf from Colombia, Mika from California, Ryan from Connecticut, Emilio from Virginia Beach. Thanks for tuning in live. A couple more things to announce. There's a lot going on at BIM Pure, which is our expert-driven learning website for Revit and BIM at bimpure.com. So we have lots of new content for subscribers that is being released this summer. The last Monday, on May 27th, we've released the first version of our Revit doors collection. These are high-quality Revit door families. Next week, on June 6th, 2024, we're releasing a mini course that lasts 25 minutes. You can watching during your lunch break with Mercedes Kerikiri, co-founder of Slantis. It's a mini course that teaches you how to develop a strong culture in your firm to foster tech and innovation. Because training and templates are not enough. You need a strong culture in your firm if you want to see innovation and tech adoption. ACC live masterclasses. If you want to make the most out of your ACC subscription, Autodesk Construction Cloud, we're hosting 4 live events. Me, Dan Warren, and Benjamin Dufour. We're going to talk about the basic setup of ACC, but also advanced features, clash detection. So there are 4 different dates. The dates are all at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can watch the replays as well. And finally, at the end of the summer, with Eric Fritz, a mini course called Getting Started with Revit API, September 5th. So all this content is being part of the BIM Pure platform. There's a single price point. You subscribe to BIM Pure and you get access to every content, including our collection of Revit courses, downloadable content, Dynamo scripts, the pro template, access to the community, replays of past live events, and constant new updates. So check it out at bimpure.com. So today's guest is the second time on the show, Havard Vasshaug. He's the founder of Anker and Revit. So let's not waste time and let's bring it on. Havard, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Thanks for coming back to the show. Last time we had a blast. We talked about how Revit prevents digital construction in your terms and your vision for the industry. And we had kind of a glimpse of what you were doing with Anker, but not that much. So today we thought it would be interesting to talk about Anker a little more and your vision for BIM data and how you see it. But first, can you tell us how has it been going? You're managing 2 companies. We've chatted a little bit before the show started, you said there were a lot of changes.
Well, the short story is it's going really well. I'm doing okay. I'm happy with a lot of things happening. I told you that I had my fourth kid in November last year. My daughter that is now what, 7 months or something. I guess I should know. And then no new companies since last time we spoke, which is which is great.
Each
Only
year, it's a
two.
new company or a new baby.
Yeah, no, so it's still Rio, absolutely, that I started as a Bad Monkeys company, I would say, like 6 years ago, a little bit more than 6 years ago. I was working at Snøhetta, and then I started my company. In the beginning, it was just me, and then we gradually grew and like explored the industry through a very like organic and cool journey, I would say. And then Anker became a reality. We started programming on the platform, I think 2, 3 years ago, and then we were a company. I think we spoke in May last year,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
the company went live in April, so it was pretty fresh.
It was quite fresh. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think I'm not sure if we talked about this last time, but we chat about it before the session started. The differences between a consulting company and a product company.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about it? You said consulting is much easier.
May, that could be because I did
Hmm.
consulting for 6 years and product for one. So maybe,
The
in six
experience.
years I'll say that product is easier, but I don't know. It's um yeah, there's a lot of, well, first of all, I've had to like really learn a lot about product companies that I didn't know before. I think just like a year ago when we spoke, I just started the first conversations with investors, and that's been steep and massively overwhelming, but also useful learning, both learning and learning curve. And then, yeah, there's a bunch of other things, pricing and how you want to scale and things like not problematic things, but like challenges that if you're not used to them and you're used to consulting, you don't really have to deal with. So putting a hourly fee, like figuring out what the fee of your hour is or the fixed price of your project, maybe in retrospect, I shouldn't worry so much about because that was pretty easy when we were doing consulting.
Uh, yeah, so just to recap, let's say for people who haven't watched the last session, so you've worked as a BIM specialist for a while, and then there was the Bad Monkeys group, a group of advanced BIM specialists. Then you founded your own firm, a BIM consulting firm, and then you decided to go with the product. And I think you've talked a little bit about why the origin story of Anchor, but I think it would be good to point out again what flaws you saw in the industry, what drove you crazy about BIM data that you thought we need something new to solve this problem.
Absolutely. I um I I might have been a little bit like provoking and edgy about a year ago when I said Revit prevented digital construction. I don't. I should probably take that back. I think there's a lot of great things in Revit that is really enabling digital construction. But we, like in everything that we did, and going all the way back to like my BIM days in engineering firms and architectural firms, and also building a company that specialized in programming. And we came like the Bad Monkeys network, if anything, came like really, really strongly from the Dynamo community and the Dynamo community, and then the Revit forums and the Revit community before that. So we were really accustomed to building applications, custom applications, scripts, and whatever, and also like, of course, implementing and learning scale proper applications and programs. But we always hit our heads on that ceiling when we were doing it on gradually bigger and bigger projects, more and more data, more and more files. Ever since day one, Autodesk always said that the only way you get more and more data in a Revit file, the only way you can make it faster is like split it up into multiple files. So now on like I see projects with hundreds of Revit files because they're like they need to be split up in more databases, and that again like creates new challenges. So you have more data in each Revit file, and you have more Revit files, and that was the the ceiling that we kept hitting our heads on, and that's where I really feel like the classic Revit workflow and the classic BIM, desktop application, click, grind, wall, window, that kind of, and then build script, run script, that didn't really, we could do that all day long and put our hourly fee and like keep doing the scripts, but you'd always have to open Revit, you always have to open a file, you have to deal with work sets and design options and constraints and broken families and everything, and then you have to deal with Revit. So and how Revit handles data and in that database, and in like that's maybe a big and too complex and a difficult explanation, but very simply, we built, simply explained, we built probably between 5 and 10 different Revit applications, built often based on Dynamo scripts as prototypes. And these applications were going to do something like get set parameter value by name, set parameter value by name, data transformation, changing it, combining with Excel spreadsheet, writing a string, combining a string, splitting a string, all this like parameter manipulation. But however nice and that user interface of the add-in was, you'd always have to open that file and run it, and that just became glass ceiling. So we decided, in a sunny day, when everyone was feeling good and kind of like open to risk, that we should move all of that out of Revit. So that's what we did.
It's moved out of Revit. So okay, so we're gonna show how it's been moved out of it. But I'm wondering, like, how do you see the industry at large? I had like a big talk with Martin Day of AC Magazine last year.
Yeah.
And for him, it was pretty clear that we're moving to a future where things are cloud-based. The idea of a file and linked files might become obsolete. So I'm wondering, like it seems like we're still using Revit files for now. I don't know how long it's going to be. How do you see the future? How long do you think Revit files, the concept of files, is going to be around? Maybe it's going to stick. I don't know.
Well, we're certainly hoping that it stops being a constraint, as it is today. And that's like we're importing files into Anker, of course, but the moment something comes into Anker, it's not a file anymore. Then it's data in a database. And I think that's definitely what everything is going to be. I think Autodesk is doing the same thing. I think probably all the big software vendors and a lot of small ones as well are doing the same thing, like breaking it down into elements and properties. And that's what we are doing. But like on a larger scale for the industry, I have this like a paradox inside of me that I've carried around for many years now. I saw Revit for the first time 19 years ago, and I became very quickly a Revit expert, and I became like a Dynamo guy at the office and so on. And the paradox that I really feel even stronger and stronger about every year is that the speed of digital transformation in the society, and not just in the industry, is both slow and fast. These two things are like coexisting, and it's dynamic between these two things. It's like, I don't want to start talking about politics and governments and states and blah blah blah, but it's like you can even see this in the light of change and static. What is going to stay how it is and what is going to be new, and innovation and standardization are also these two like dynamics. So I think that we'll keep seeing like a lot of new things happening and a lot of fast changes appearing, but we'll keep also at the same time dealing with like pretty old traditional stuff. So I don't know if the files are probably not going to go away very fast. People still use AutoCAD, man. And
that's always what I think about,
Yeah.
When people say Revit's going to be obsolete within a few years, maybe, like, who knows? But like, and we're still using Excel and we're still using Photoshop, even though there's Figma, for example. So it's possible we have to deal with all of this.
I think probably we don't want to talk about this entire day, but I think it's really interesting that you have a sponsor that's Enscape, because Enscape I often think of as like a pretty fun example of how something just changed overnight. Is that it kind of like, I saw this like firsthand. I was sitting in architectural offices when it started spreading, and all of a sudden it was on everyone's computer. And there's like lots of factors. I talked to the founder. There's a lot of different factors that made that happen, but it's pretty interesting. The effect that it had was that all of a sudden, boom, overnight, Enscape's on every computer, and that changed something. People don't spend a lot of time exporting FBX files to 3ds Max and like that long process of rendering farms, and that's like becoming less and less and less. It didn't completely disappear; it still happens, but it just became less. And now every architect is doing a lot of rendering on their own, and people started caring about render appearance in Revit. Boom! All of a sudden, nobody cared about render appearance in Revit until then. And how you model in 3D and so on. So that mechanism I find is very, very interesting. And that was a quick change.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. That's right. Like it seems like a couple of years, and it was almost viral, a viral new app. I've read somewhere like to displace an incumbent, like a new solution has to be like an order of magnitude better. So like at least 10 times better. So, and if it's 10 times better, it will start spreading naturally like a virus.
But Enscape wasn't 10 times better. Enscape was like Lumion, just cheaper. And
yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not an expert on this, but I just find that it's super fascinating, these things. And also to see how some things are still old and traditional. I'm still importing that Rhino file into Revit and trying to make it a family. But at the same time, some things change fast, and some things like really super fast. And sometimes those changes change what we care about and what we do.
All right, I think that's a pretty good prelude to showing a little bit of Anker. So let's move on. Let me okay. So we can see your screen. We can see Anker.
All right.
Can you give us your pitch? So we've talked about the idea of having data on the cloud. So if you were to summarize what Anker can do for you, how would you describe it?
So when I've stopped trying to do elevator pitches. I can't, and that's because of those 19 years of BIM. I just can't do a 20-second pitch.
Well, let's do a 30-minute pitch then.
Yeah, I'll or maybe somewhere in between. So and I'll move from macro to micro, maybe start with the macro. I was asked actually by some people in a panel, like big people with suits, a few years ago, whether BIM had a massive financial benefit for the building industry. And quite honestly, BIM at its core, I don't know. Probably a little bit, but I don't see a lot of architectural firms and engineering firms making a lot of money. Maybe we certainly deliver projects faster, but for a lot of people, BIM stops at the door of the engineer and the architect. I learned how to use it to just make graphic outputs faster, with less errors, more like less class detection, more like everything is in 3D and then blah blah blah. But the data stops at the door, and the big rest of the industry who is out there, who are not using BIM, they are still looking at graphic outputs from a database, which seems like really stupid. Okay, and then there's a bunch of reasons for that, but and this is, I'm not making it up. This is just how I've observed the industry the last 5-10 years. So what has changed is that the people outside of design teams, mainly the contractors and the owners, have started trying to figure out how to use BIM, but not like BIM, how we think about BIM, the data in BIM for their digitization. So when you're an owner and you're doing facility management, or when you're a contractor and you're doing construction process, I suppose you have like two choices. Either you can use the architect's BIM or you don't. You use the architect's drawing and then maybe do your own data. Or you use the architect's BIM and just plug it into your systems, and then everything happens automatically. And that's the dream that these people have, is that if I receive BIM data from an architect or an engineer that I can trust and that I can use, I can become massively effective. This is what the owners and the contractors are telling me. So they are waiting to digitize their processes. And one of the big hurdles that are standing in front of them is, can I use the BIM that's coming from design teams? And by the way, this is at very different stages of in different places in the world. What I'm describing is maybe more mature in the Nordic countries and in places across Europe and Asia, and I don't know, probably elsewhere as well, but most of the people I talk with are there. So, and then of course, very simply put, you're a contractor, you have like 10 different architectural firms that are delivering a BIM for you. These 10 different architectural firms use 10 different door libraries, like maybe one of them use yours, and they get like completely inconsistent data. Of course, they can't plug that BIM into their system and click a button and then get all that value from the digitization. They can't, because everything is inconsistent. Either someone has a template, or someone is working in Belgium, or someone has a door library from someone else, or people just make their own families like me. So what do we do? Yes, we mandate ISO standards, and we mandate building smart stuff, and we mandate IFC deliverables, of course, and we mandate custom company standards and BIM requirements. And this, like, we hand over to the design teams, and they have to sign the contract that they are going to deliver it. So now you're an architect and you're working for 10 different contractors, you have to deliver 10 different types of data. Of course, something is unified and standardized in ISO and so on, but there's always an element of custom in this. So that was a really long explanation. I'm sorry, but what this means is that architectural firms and engineering firms, they have to adjust to a future and a reality where they have to deliver very effectively different data for different clients. They have to do this in an agile way, because no client ever comes to you and say, this is my BIM requirements, see you in 2 years, this is never going to change. That never happens. We have some projects where BIM requirements change 250 times during design process. So, because of course, owners and contractors are at the same time trying to figure out, what their process is going to be like. Oh, 2 years ago, we decided for a classification system that doesn't work anymore. We would prefer Uniclass or Omniclass or something like that. So the nature of the building industry is that everything is changing all the time, and we just need a better system to make sure that the contractor can tell the design team what I'm saying, contractor and owner tell the design team what they need and when they need it, and make it much easier for the design team to deliver that data. And for us, that solution is Anker.
Yeah, and sometimes, BIM requirements, it's not always clear when you get that from the client. Sometimes it is, but some clients, maybe they don't know that much about it, and you can feel sometimes maybe there's a little bit of copy paste from previous projects. Yeah. And in different scales of project, the BIM requirements for an airport that wouldn't make sense for multifamily housing, for example. But I've heard or saw some stories where that actually happens, and the BIM requirement are a little bit crazy for the scale of the project.
Yeah, you probably have like everywhere in the industry, you have a long, like in Tour de France, you have a extremely long field. Someone is in front, someone is in middle, and someone is in the back, and then there's a lot of copy paste, and a lot of people don't know what and certainly, like when I started with Revit, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just moving around walls and wondering why I didn't do what I wanted to do. So I suppose in many ways it's probably the same for these guys. They're like putting their feet in the water and trying to figure out, okay, what can happen. So and that's why I think having it's weird, Nicholas, because I'm saying the same thing that I did 19 years ago when I was teaching people to do Revit. You need an agile place, a database where you can change things in one place, and then everywhere else it changes because the project changes. You need to move stuff around, and it's the same now. just need to do it on a higher level in a database for the entire project.
All right. That was a good intro. So trying to
Man,
solve this
I
issue.
talk way too much. Sorry.
It's fine. So we know it now. We got to solve this BIM requirement issues and trying to smooth the flow between designers and professionals to contractors and owners. So
Yeah.
now let's see a screen. So we're seeing Anchor. So what's going on there?
Yeah, so it's Anchor's on the web. It's a database on the web, and what I'm seeing here is our URL where I have a homepage with my projects, and then I have some. This is me and Eric's project. We're playing around with some files and some demos inside the project, but our customers, they have an organization, and that's what I'm looking at now. And then they have people in the organizations who collaborate, and then there's some simple stuff here that I don't need to go into. We have a Revit plugin, there's a user guide and blah, blah, blah. But most of the good stuff, it happens in projects. So I don't know what the official term of a PIM or a project information model is, but like I sometimes feel that maybe we are that. So when you go into projects, which you can do here, or you can be on the front page, create project, or click on any of these like sample projects that you have, you come into a place where there's a bunch of value that you can do, I would say, very generally. So just quickly explain, and feel free to ask any questions as we go. Easily explained, we're saying that number one, it needs to be on the cloud so people can collaborate on live stuff. Number two, it needs to be a database. So this is a database. It's a flat database with a web front end. Number three, we need to move that data out of Revit. Okay, we've done that. There's like 3 different Revit files in this project and some other data sources as well. And then 4, I would say, and maybe most importantly, is that nobody really wants to do data manually. So it needs to be automation native from day one. And that's like makes me really, my heart fills with joy when I think about it, is that everything is rule based and everything is automation based. So that is I think the only way you can like deal with trillions of data in a constant changing environment is through rules and automation. And then there's other stuff in here as well that our customers find usable, but like just to go through the user interface maybe first. We have a simple, nice graph that Jonas, my colleague, has designed that gives me the aggregate of all the validations that I have on this project. So most people today use Anchor for verifying data or creating data. Verification or validation of metadata on projects was the first product that we built, and I suppose was when I thought that, okay, we have a good idea. We have a product. We should do a company, because the two most forward-leaning public building owners in Norway were our 2 first clients. And they needed easy way to validate the data. So that was our first value proposition, I suppose. But then,
so if sorry to interrupt, but like, is that data, is it originally coming from Revit and then it's brought to Anchor, and then that's where you can validate it?
So Anchor imports 2 different BIM data sources today. We have IFC and Revit. So there's a bi-directional link with Revit. I'll get to the details later. And there's a bi-directional link with IFC, wherever they may come from. So what I'm seeing here is data quality of Revit properties, because I'm in this project I'm using Revit, but in other projects like I can look at this infrastructure project here. This is IFC data. So we do both, and that's something that I really think is super cool also, that we don't just deal with IFC files, because that's kind of like easy. If the moment we say like, okay, give me the IFC file and then we can see what we do. The hard problem actually in many ways is to get to a good IFC file. So I'm sorry again. I'm giving you a really long explanation, so I'll try to control myself. But this is Revit data. And then there's some simple on the front page here. We're just trying to make our time to value as quickly as possible. So when you link to the Revit file, there's some information here that maybe some people find interesting and some might not. But there's like fill rate of property values, different properties that have same values, and then different property names that are similar and so on. So it could give maybe some interesting insights for people who need to sit in one central place and manage large data sets. I move on to files. This is basically where you look at the data sources, whether they are coming from your computer. You can import IFC files directly from computer, or CSV files that people use for enriching models, or you can get your Anker data from our add-in in Revit that looks like this. Pretty simple user interface. And then or you can stream both IFC, CSV, and Revit from ACC, from Autodesk Construction Cloud. And I would say that keep in mind that this is not actually a file. What I have on my Revit desktop is a file, and what I have on ACC maybe is a file. But once it comes into Anker, it's just elements and properties. So the moment an IFC file or a Revit file comes into Anker, kind of like a CSV also, it's rows and columns and data. And it's the same thing we do with Revit and IFC. You break it down into elements and properties. For IFC, elements and properties and p-sets. And then for Revit, elements and properties, built-in properties, family properties, shared parameters, and so on.
And you talked about validation earlier. So what kind of things people validate, and how do you set up validation? Is it from specific standards, or is it always custom, user-defined? Tell me about that.
Always, in my experience, always both. So everyone uses validation, both people who produce data and also people who receive data. Actually, I'll show a different validation. I hear everything is correct, and that's always boring. So I'll go to a project where everything is not correct. Maybe this one. Yeah. So everyone needs validation, and nobody wants to spend time doing it. So we put in a very, very simple diagram and table view and interactive dashboard that people can use to understand what the quality of the data is. We're looking at metadata. So we're looking at elements and properties and property values. This is coming from IFC. I'm checking, this is Norwegian, I'm sorry, but and this is from one of our infrastructure project clients. So I'm looking at something called material, and it's like object information. And this is a p-set and a property on IFC elements. And it's supposed to be on all these elements, I guess, and it's not. So there's 1,490 elements in this data set, excluding like filters. So this is probably where most of the people who use Anker today for validation is spending their time. They're configuring these validation rules. So when you create a validation, you can import from requirements like IDS or MVD XML file, or even just Excel spreadsheet. And then it will batch create all the validation rules inside your Anker project. And then all the data sources that move through your project is going to go through this check. And then in this case, I'm just adding a list of allowed values for material. This is Norwegian, this is concrete, copper, composite, PVC, and so on. And then the results of the validation is going to highlight if something is wrong or it's missing. And then what most of the people who use validation is doing with this data is that either they just use this information themselves and then talk to someone to fix it, or they share these results either in a public URL, where you basically get a URL that you can share with anyone outside of Anker and outside of the project, to give them an interactive dashboard that they can use. This dashboard can have a bunch of filters and so on. Or they download a report that gives you the IFC GUID of the elements that are failing and missing. and use it for like documentation. And Blame, I suppose, good old Blame is underrated. And a lot of them also like stream the results of this validation out to their own Power BI dashboards. So a lot of people are doing that as well. And this works for both Revit and IFC data that we have support for today, and we really want to build more integrations in the future. Once this like product is fast, we want it to be super fast, and we want it to be stable, we want it to be user friendly. So that's like on top of our list, and then more integrations might come in the future.
Okay, so first you have this Revit plugin when you can acquire information from Revit, but is it a two-way street? Can you also, from what I understand, that's the case, you can push information constantly from the database to Revit. For example, let's say that you modify some properties in Anker, can you forward it to the Revit model?
Yeah. So that's the biggest value proposition of our product. We understand that every common data environment and a lot of software and programs are going to have validation. It's easy to do. It's simple to build, and that is going to be a big low-hanging fruit for a lot of products. So that's not where the real value creation is. In some ways, actually, and we've been discussing this internally, if our validation should be free, which I think would be great, because if more people validate, more people will want to find better ways to create data. But anyway, our biggest value proposition by far is in the manipulation of data. And this is where, this is what happens in populate. So populate, which is what we call data writing, or if you're into Dynamo, set parameter by name, or if you're into IFC, a lot of people call it enriching. You get an IFC file and you want to put more data in it or connect more data to it, then we call it enriching. But whatever you call it, is like basically creating data. So we populate data. And as with validation, so actually in Anker, validation and population, although they look different, they're actually like two sides of the same coin. They actually have the same code in the background. And it's built up in the same way. It's filters and rules. So we have the same thing in population, although the UI looks a little bit different. In our development cycle, validation is always a few months ahead of population. So population is in a lot of ways the same thing. You have filters and you have rules. And then for population, just like with validation, you can go pretty deep in the checks with validation. For instance, we can do like regex checks here for instance, for date formatting and work package information that should always be like 4 numbers, and everything that is not exactly 4 numbers is going to fail. You can go pretty deep in the validation, also in terms of like lengths of lists of allowed values. You can go deep in population, even to like stuff like this, where you're filtering out stuff, Revit category. And what's cool about this is that it goes across all the files by default. So you can add more custom filters here if you just want to look at one file. But by default, we're looking at everything in your entire project. And then I'm here copying a revision date from the zone, which is a mass element that I have in a separate Revit file. So this is a workflow that we see a lot happening around that. I build up an empty Revit model that doesn't contain anything else than just mass elements. And then I use these mass elements to batch write data to the elements inside of them. This is for the facade. These colored elements are for the roof and facade. Control zones is what we call it. And then this is for interior. And then a rule in Anker will look like this then. Then I'm copying like LOI from the volume to the elements inside the volume. I'm copying work package data from the mark parameter of the. So I go into Revit and I have here that mass. That mass has a mark 2502. That's the work package number of the stuff that's going to be constructed inside of here. And then I copy that from the old model mark parameter in Revit to a custom work package parameter on the elements inside of them. So this is one way a population can work. I can also copy data from Excel spreadsheets. Like in this case, I'm just very simply copying data from columns in Excel to rooms using, again, like a link data. I have a link parameter here that kind of like attaches rooms to rows in Excel. And then I have more simple stuff like this one, for instance, where I'm filtering based on file. I'm saying architectural models, arc interior, arc shell, and that is not furniture, for instance, is going to get all of this contract number, execution lead, design lead, delivery lead, completion lead, demolition lead. This is all like a construction process data, and this number says something about the contract that this element belongs to, and who's responsible for it, discipline, and so on. So how you configure these population rules, kind of like a Dynamo script, you have lists and filters and so on, and then different outputs based on basically what the filter is going to be like and what the logic should be. The simplest that I have. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I do have a question. Like recently, I've been working with a client who they have a team, project managers, and they're entering room data in a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet. And then you have like the Revit team, and they want to like for the room tags to be accurate. And it's often information from Excel. So we're trying to find the right solution. What we ended up doing is some sort of Dynamo script, and we used a tool from Bird Tools that allow us to run the script on a schedule. So it works, but I'm wondering, it seems like kind of convoluted workflow for everything we had to do. So how do you see this? Is this something that Anker could do, like to try to automate the link between room data from Excel, where a project manager acts, like to ensure that the drawing team, modeling team in Revit has accurate, up-to-date information?
Yeah, that's like like you, I've built probably 150 different Dynamo scripts that import some Excel data and connect it to. Yeah, it's one of the earliest examples I think I ever did with Dynamo. And it's the same, and there's a bunch of different applications that do this, but they all hit that ceiling. You always have to be inside of Revit and click buttons, even though you can automate it. And I've done actually on this project on the government quarters in Oslo, we built 100 different processes that run at night, that all open Revit and all do some things. And this is like super cool. I presented this at Autodesk University, and it's
the Night Runner thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, Night Runner, IFC export, IFC import, bunch of like parameter manipulation and moving around. But it's really cost intense to build and set up and maintain. So I think that's like a big realization that we had when we wanted to start building a product like this, is that doing that with a product like Anker, it's like in 4 minutes. I can literally do that in 4 minutes. Actually, I set that workflow up for an architectural firm 2 hours ago, and it's ridiculously simple. The only tiny like problem that we ever had was how do you move that data into Revit, which is very difficult when you're in, you have to deal with a bunch of Revit constraints and opening Revit files and so on. But the last couple of months, we've been working really hard on being able to like push that data to Revit models, just cloud to cloud. So you can do that today here. So I go to Anker, parameter export. I have a setting here that just selects this. This is 3 different parameters that I have in Revit. So if I click on this room and go down here, here. So it's just like random stupid data parameter 1, data 2, data 3, bad, average, and good. And then before I'd have to go into Revit, click this pull button like you would do with the Rofus or like Dynamo scripts and so on. But today I can just execute this. So that is going to, and then I can do that on multiple Revit files if I want. And that is going to like open that Revit file on BIM 360 or ACC and then write all that data into Revit. And
so it's doing so in kind of in the background. Revit doesn't have to be open.
Yes,
that's what you're saying. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Exactly.
Like, can you schedule it?
You know what, Nicola? I have a dream. I wake up in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. Nobody is awake yet. My kids, all my 4 kids are still sleeping. You know what I dream about? I dream and pray that my product team will listen to my prayers, that I can go into Automate and then execute a parameter export to BIM 360. When that is done, no hands. then everything is fully automatic. Everything. Then what I do, and I'm going to do that demo, and the moment that demo works in the way I want it to work, I'm going to do something like this, or maybe better to use the example from before. This is my stupid small project. I have an Excel spreadsheet. This is actually a CSV file. The CSV file is looking for a room number. This is room number, the number parameter for the rooms in Revit. And then I have data, parameter name, and also something else, occupant. And then I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to say, move the average to bad. I'm going to move the good here, something like this over here. Okay, so on. And then I'm going to save this file. And because that CSV file is on a folder that I'm monitoring with Anker in our ACC connection with webhooks, that brings this data automatically into Anker. When it comes into Anker, let's follow it actually. We'll go into Anker. I'm following it. When it comes into Anker, and it should actually start appearing here pretty soon, it will, because I've set up an automation here that is going to listen to that change, it will start executing a few population rules. So okay, I'll do this one more time. I'm saving the CSV file on ACC in a folder that I'm monitoring with Anker with webhooks. That data comes into Anker. Once it does, it executes an automation that executes a population. That population moves room number from the Revit property to a custom Anker property. It moves some room data. Remember these, blah, blah, blah. I'm copying this through relationships to all the rooms, basically, but it's still Anker data. And then in the end, I'm going to have an automation rule here that does that exact thing that you said, this thing here, on a schedule. Then we're done. Then I can go home.
Okay, so what you're saying, you modify the CSV file and Anker does the rest.
Yes.
Right? And then you open Revit and ta-dam, your data is accurate and up to date.
Exactly. This is my ACC for this sample project. I have 2 Revit files, an architecture, I have a structural file, and then I have a CSV file that's here. So I now opened it with Autodesk Docs on my computer, fortunately. So I need to find a way how to get that demo to just be like boom, 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 finished. But this now should be, my internet connection is unstable. This should be updated in ACC, and when it's updated in ACC, it's going to start appearing here in Anker, and then it's going to execute all those automations, and then at the end write it to Revit.
So is that only for ACC projects? What about old school firms using kind of a central local file thing?
Works exactly the same, but if you use central local file system, the only way you can get Anker Revit data into Anker is through the add-in. So then you have to open Revit and you have to work on local files and synchronize with central, and then does everything the same. The only bit of that piece that you won't be able is getting that automatic import of the CSV file into Anker. We don't monitor folders on computers, at least yet. And also you, of course, won't be able to do the cloud-based parameter export that uses our ACC connection. But a lot of people are using different types of automation processes to open Revit and click buttons. And because our push, the different push and pull that you can use here manually to get data to and from Anker between Revit and Anker can be triggered on a Revit sync, really to get that bidirectional thing working in Revit on desktop. You just need to open Revit, open that file, make it synchronize to central, and then close it. Then all the data should be updated between Anker and Revit.
Okay, so you don't necessarily have to hit that push pull button that I see there, like a sync and do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, it's a setting here and setup where you have different ways, a few different options. You can enable push on sync save, and that's going to update the Anker database. Actually, we should probably also add pull here, but the issue with with pull is that it produces this list of properties where you have Revit parameters and then you have Anker parameters. This is like a user interface that we really want to get rid of. It's like old school stuff, so this will change. But and then when I click pull parameters, this brings Anker data into my Revit parameters, and then you can like make this also headless pretty easily and just bake it into a sink, and then it's pretty easy to batch process that on your PC.
There's a couple of questions in the chat. Let's take a few of them from
Oh,
Liz.
look! Hold on. See, the CSV file updated 1 minute ago. Wait, there we go. Sorry, go ahead with the question.
All good. So we've got a question from Liz and Claire. What's the size of the firms that are using Anker? How many people are in the smallest firms? I guess the question is about what kind of clients do you typically work with? Big, medium, small, large, extra large?
All sizes, really. Actually, we don't have a lot of like. Actually, we do. We just signed a license agreement with one of the biggest engineering firms in Europe. So we're talking about like 10, 15,000 employees. But our smallest customers, like BIM consultancy firms with like 3, 4 people. So it's everything. I used to think that it was only for big projects. One of the reasons was, well, like a lot of the ideas on this product came from a big project, but actually we see a lot of smaller projects as well. Like people just find it extremely effective on both big and small projects. I'd say that if your project has one file, then maybe the value proposition is not. It's pretty easy to explain that with the number of files, and Revit really makes sure that you have like no ability to to work across files. You can link them into each other, but you can't really do anything between the files in Revit. So I think it's pretty obvious then with the number of files, both Revit and IFC, that the value of Anker becomes greater. So I'd say that I don't see a lot of differences in team size, but more in like number of files. Yeah.
There's a question from JCKL. So the question is this, so they can sort out any format of EIR. So EIR, I guess that's the ISO standard from. I'm always confused with these acronyms, but like, do you have any ISO 19650 integrations? Like when you validate?
No.
Is that even a thing?
I don't like. I'm old enough now to say that I don't understand what that means. I don't know. When you create a validation today, you can import requiremements. You can do that from, it says here, from MVD XML and Excel, but also we have IDS import and JSON, so you can, or other data sources. So like batch creating validations based on external data is very, very easy to do. And we do that, but don't ask me about ISO 19650. I haven't read it. I probably should, but what an ISO 19650 integration would mean, I don't know.
Okay. All good. Like ISO confuses me quite a lot, to be honest. So, a question from Mika: what BIM data specifically can we manage with Anker?
You can today read all BIM data from IFC files and Revit files, and you can write all custom properties and piece sets to IFC files, and you can write all shared parameters in Revit. You cannot write IFC schema parameters yet, and you cannot write Revit built-in parameters yet. This is something that's on our to-do list. We need to do it, of course, but there's two things. Number one, for IFC, when you start changing IFC schema parameters, things can go really wrong. So we want to make sure that we do it right. Number two, same thing with Revit. There are so many different types of built-in parameters, nested parameters, a number. What happens if we by accident change like the width of a wall to something crazy? We want to really make sure that we do it right. And probably for Revit, what we'll start doing strings, basic string like mark, type comments, description, these types of things. And then we'll start doing booleans, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And probably it will be the same for IFC. Maybe we start doing groups, zoning, we start doing predefined type, maybe name changes and so on. But we really want to make sure that we don't break anything when we start touching the built-in parameters in both IFC and Revit. But we'll definitely do that. And then I'd add that in my experience, the biggest problem is actually all that custom data. So most of our customers have been pretty happy with the way that we both read and write custom parameters, shared parameters in Revit, and then custom P sets and properties in IFC. So that's why we started there. Yeah.
All right. Next question from Nordic Sailing. Automation processes produce huge scripts. Does this add to Revit's overall project size?
Nope, because we got it out of Revit.
Yeah, so it's out of Revit. Doesn't affect the size at all.
No.
Question from Paul Z. Maybe a bit stupid question, but can you validate DWGs as companies still require them? Is there even data in DWGs?
I think you can, but not in Anker. And I think there's data. I've also dreamt about having, of course, we should probably have a Civil 3D connection, and we should probably have an AutoCAD connection. We should probably have a Rhino connection as well, because a lot of people want to connect data to lines and geometry, but not with Anker. We haven't really thought about that. And I think that apart from maybe Civil 3D, there's a few other tools that are higher up on the list. Really love to get a Tekla and ArchiCAD connection, and then also, of course, like support the infrastructure design tools as well.
More of a comment from Nordic Sailing. IFC is not meant to be changed. What do you think about that?
Ask the people who need to change them. I have no opinion about that. I just know a million people who need to change
Asking
IFCs.
for it. Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
That's it for the questions from now. We still have a few more minutes if you want. Do you have some more things you wanted to showcase?
Maybe just like to cap it off with the whole like workflow, how it works. I've set it up with Revit. I have my file, and this is a very, very typical example. People work in files. Have anything from 2 and 10 and 15 different people collaborating on Revit in a work shared environment. People change things. I delete this wall, and then that didn't mean to happen. I'm going to create a new wall. Of course, Revit problem number one, or maybe not number one, but actually at least a pretty big problem with Revit then is that that new wall that I just modeled is completely empty, doesn't have any data connected to it except like all the built-in parameters like base constraint, top constraint, blah, 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 room bounding, and so on. So for this wall to be usable in a construction process and as a digital twin downstream for owners, it needs a bunch of data. So what I'm going to do then, I'm going to just sync in Revit. Remember, I've attached that file to that ACC connection and also enabled the updating of the Anker database through the sync process. There's literally no overhead on the sync process because we're only dealing with text and numbers. Actually, that's not entirely true. I am here during the sync process also matching the location of these elements, like telling them which math they are inside. But apart from that, we're just like text and numbers. Now, when I did that, what happens was that, you see here, all these population rules starts running one in a time because I've enabled automation. Automation here has like 7 different population rules running. I'm updating my validations. I'm updating actually all the relationships between the rooms and the Excel spreadsheets. And everything is just running and it's live. And now when this is done, all the data is updated in Anker. And then when I go into Revit and open my Anker properties palette, that is an Electron application that looks at the data on the web, You can see it has all this data. So this is why we built Anker. People shouldn't sit and punch data manually, and they shouldn't have to run a Dynamo script or an Excel or an add-in every time anyone changes anything in the model, like sitting up until 2 a.m. at night before a deliverable. This should always just be there, and it should be rule-based. And the last thing that we need to do to get like to the ultimate demo, as I said, is to like just move this also inside of Revit. I don't think all of this data needs to be in Revit, but at least the data that you need to have in Revit should be in Revit. And then all of this will get exported to the IFC file during export, and then it can move on to a construction site and create happy moods and happy people.
We have a couple more questions from Raf Mufti. Can you do project management and control with Anker with $ cost estimation, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, you'll get insights into what's happening across all the different Revit files on your entire project. So if the data inside the BIM on the project is interesting for project management, then that should definitely be interesting. And whatever you want to do, like dashboards or just quantities or understanding the development or understanding of if someone deleted the 1500 walls yesterday from today and like that sort of insight. But generally, I'd say absolutely.
What about cost estimation? Is that something you could do with it? If there's enough accurate money and cost data inside of the model in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. But you wouldn't have to add like, of course, you have the cost built-in property that I never used in Revit as a type parameter on everything, and you can use that. But maybe it would make more. We have customers who do sustainability calculations based on BIM now because they have Excel spreadsheets with like data on the sustainability impact of certain types of elements, and then connect that with the Revit data in Anker, and then have like live dashboards that give you insights into how things are, and also like development over time. So you can do all of those things.
Question about AI. Your thoughts about AI and maybe Anker AI one day. And from Paul and Meadow says, does this have AI model integration? What do you think?
It has zero AI integration today. And that's something, of course, I would love to go to every investor pitch and say we have AI integration, but we don't. So I would be lying.
The money would flow from the investors.
Exactly, like manna from heaven. This is a topic we've discussed many times. Of course, I would love to have some kind of AI, and I get excited about technology like everyone else. I want to have AI create all my populations, for instance, based on the kind of document. Let's say that you have like a Norwegian standard for classification that is 259 pages in PDF. I don't want to read those pages. My AI can. I'll load that up into Anker, and then it just configures all my populations and validations and automations based on what's in the standard. That I think could be super cool to put into Anker and very usable for a lot of people. I would love to have some kind of AI classification. Actually, on this project, when I worked on this project, there's a bunch of stone cladding on the facade and lots of sun screening and solar shading in here. And there's a lot of mechanism in the stone facade of this project that I had no idea what needed to be like. What is this stone cladding supposed to be classified as? I don't know. It's certainly not a wall. And I'd love to have some kind of AI just look at what it is and maybe compare it to like history of stuff online or whatever, and say that, oh, sir, this is probably a IFC covering or something like that. I would love to have that as functionality, AI functionality inside of Anker, but we have to solve the problems. We have to build the product in the right sequence and not get like too keen on AI in the beginning, and let's just get it in the right sequence, because if we do it too early, our product and our market is not mature enough, I think. But sure, I get excited about this like everyone else. And then also, like, I'd like to add that a big problem with AI in the building industry, I think, is that we can use it for like, I know probably I'll get hate mail for saying this, but like mostly image and text, because that's the type of data we have access to use in AI. No, very, very few people, nobody that I know can use AI on top of BIM data, because we don't have access to consistent high quality data. So in many ways, a lot of the building owners and contractors that come to us want to use Anker to get to a place where they have data that an AI can use. So at least these are reflections that I have about that. Yeah.
Interesting. What about a chatbot where you could chat with the data in Anker? Ask,
Yeah,
like, hey, is the door this and that has the correct information?
Yeah. That's an interesting opportunity. I'll do what we have been doing all along, and that is listen to the market. So we talk to our customers, and I sit in 3-4 sales meetings now every day, and I talk to people and I ask them what they would mostly like to see. And that hasn't been a question I've gotten a lot, but if that changes, then absolutely we'll build it.
Okay, let's talk. Let's take a couple more questions, then we can close this. Yeah, there's a comment from Jonathan Jacobson. Preach it, Håvard. Amazing demo of the strength of Anker. Nordic Sailing. If you're changing the data, then it needs to be published to everyone involved with the project at the phase you are working at. How are you covering that?
That's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, like the phasing of and when the information is published or not.
Anker is a live database, just like Revit. You move a wall, everything changes. It's live. It's live. That's what we do. We do store snapshots of validations over time, and also snapshots of quantities over time, but we don't like keep a live one-to-one copy of every second of the database at any point in time. And also, I suppose in some ways you cover it by managing who has access to changing these rules, and that's usually like someone who's responsible for BIM in the project, and whether they do push this data to Revit with Dynamo or add-ins or Excel or Anker. I think the process is the same.
All right, that's it for the questions. So I'm going to close the episode. Just a couple of reminders. First, thanks to Enscape for sponsoring this episode and the whole season of BIM Pure Live. So check out the new version, Enscape 4.0, enscape3d.com. The Summer of BIM 2024. It's a series of new content we're putting out on the BIM Pure membership. So check out the Revit Doors collection, our new course, Culture Beats Technology, which is out next week, our series of live events about ACC with me, Dan Warren, and Benjamin Zufo. That is starting on July 3rd for 4 episodes. And finally, our new mini course with Eric Fritz about getting started with Revit API. And a BIM Pure membership includes everything, all the courses, downloads, access to community, live masterclasses, and more. And back to you, Håvard. So thanks again for the session. Anything else you wanted to finish with? Comments for the audience? Requests for the audience?
If anyone wants to give this a spin and try to master data on large data sets with automation, I would love to talk to you, and I would love to give you a trial. Or actually, the easiest way probably is either connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a DM, or go to ankerdb.com and check out the stuff there and book a demo with us.
All right. So thanks to everyone in the chat for good questions as usual. Thanks, Håvard, for this and for your courage building new apps. I know it's going to be hard and meeting all these investors, raising money. Wow. So thanks for going through all of that for the good of the industry. And thanks for attending this session. So the next show is next week, 3 p.m. Eastern. I'll send all the details soon. So thanks, Havard, and thanks, everybody.